Welcome back to the Customary Land podcast, where we dive into the complex relationships between land, culture, and the future of Indigenous communities, most particularly those in the Pacific. I'm your host, Spike Boydell, and today we're talking about a growing global movement, one that's making waves across the Pacific: Indigenous sovereignty. Last week, a powerful moment unfolded in Canberra. During King Charles III's visit to Australia, Australian Senator Lidia Thorpe stood up and boldly demanded, "Give us back our land." Whilst a passionate call spoke to the harsh realities felt by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, it also resonated across the Pacific and the entire Commonwealth. This demand for justice, for the return of land to Indigenous people, is a conversation happening in boardrooms, government offices, and gatherings like the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, or CHOGM, which took place last week in Samoa. But what does Indigenous sovereignty mean for us here in the Pacific? How do we balance modern economic development with the rights and traditions of those who've cared for the land and the sea for generations? Well, let's explore this today, and along the way, we'll discuss the connections between these global movements and our own histories, from Fiji to Samoa. The global push for Indigenous sovereignty. Thorpe's actions in Australia are part of a much larger movement. Indigenous peoples across the world are reclaiming their rights to land and resources taken during colonisation. This is not just about an individual moment of protest, it's actually about a deep shared history of dispossession. Thorpe's call for reparations and land restitution is a call for justice, one that resonates with countless communities globally. Think about New Zealand, where the Maori people have been engaged in a long process of negotiating treaty settlements for decades. In North America, Native American tribes are asserting their sovereignty over traditional lands, fighting not just for recognition but also for control over resources that were taken from them. These movements, though distinct, all echo a common theme: a demand for acknowledgement, equity, and respect. Australia, despite its wealth and development, remains one of the few Commonwealth nations that has yet to sign a treaty with its Indigenous people. This raises big questions, not just for Australia, but for all of us across the Pacific. What would it mean for us to fully recognise Indigenous sovereignty in our own countries? What would it mean for the everyday lives of our communities, our children, and the future of our resources? The answer isn't simple. Recognising sovereignty is about more than just signing a document or making a public statement. It's about reshaping systems of power, challenging existing norms, and creating genuine partnerships between governments and Indigenous communities. It's about ensuring that every voice is heard, that compensation for resource use is fair, and that traditional knowledge is valued as a crucial part of our path forward. This is what makes conversations like those happening at CHOGM in Samoa last week so important. A Pacific perspective on land and resources. Pacific Islanders have their own unique traditions when it comes to land and the sea. These aren't just economic assets, they're an integral part of who the people are. The stewardship of marine and coastal resources has been at the heart of Pacific life for generations. Land is sacred, and the sea connects Indigenous peoples to their ancestors. It's not just about livelihood, it's about identity, community, and spirituality. But as tourism and development grow in our region, there's a big question we need to ask. How can we ensure that those who traditionally cared for these resources, the land and oceans, can continue to benefit from them in meaningful ways? Imagine this. A large hotel or development is built on land that's been cared for by generations of your family. Suddenly, the land that once brought families together, a place for gatherings, storytelling, and connection, as well as resource use and access and the ability to nourish and feed oneself, is transformed into a private space, accessible only to paying guests. How do you ensure that this development benefits your community, rather than pushing it aside? Across the Pacific, we're seeing new models emerge, partnerships that aim to balance the interests of economic growth with the rights of local communities. For example, in Fiji, we've seen the rise of community-based tourism projects where local landowners are actively involved in managing and benefiting from tourism developments. These models don't just bring in revenue. They strengthen community ties, preserve cultural practices, and ensure the benefits of development are shared. There's also an emerging approach to compensation that combines traditional stewardship with modern economic practices. This hybrid approach seeks to ensure that economic benefits are shared equitably, while also preserving the cultural values that are so crucial to Indigenous identity. Imagine a framework where compensation isn't just about money. It includes training, capacity building, and ensuring that traditional knowledge is respected and valued. It's about finding that balance, a balance that respects both the past and the future. One of the key aspects of this approach is the concept of partnership, a marriage of interests, if you would, between those who use the land and those who have safeguarded it for generations. This model recognizes that when both the resource owners, the traditional owners, and the resource users, the developers, the mining companies, the tourism ventures, work together, the outcome is far more valuable and completely minimizes the potential for current or future conflict. It brings financial gains, yes, but it also ensures cultural heritage is preserved, traditional owners are empowered, and future generations have something they can continue to call their own. Leading by example at CHOGM. These discussions took centre stage at CHOGM in Samoa last week. The Pacific has something unique to offer the world. The traditions of communal land and resource ownership are amongst the most intact anywhere. We know how to steward the land and the sea in ways that modern economies often overlook. These traditions, passed down through generations, are a testament to Indigenous resilience and understanding of sustainability. At CHOGM last week, Pacific leaders had an opportunity to set an example, to show that it's possible to have development that doesn't come at the cost of cultural erasure or economic degradation. Imagine policies that support tourism while safeguarding fishing rights, or development projects that require local communities to have a significant say in how they proceed. Imagine a framework where negotiations are structured, where agreements are legally binding, and where transparency is key, ensuring that all stakeholders are informed and engaged. It's about building development partnerships that are inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. This means recognizing the inherent value in traditional stewardship and ensuring that the benefits of development, whether financial, social, or cultural, are distributed in a way that respects the people who've cared for these lands and waters. This kind of careful policy development and innovative thinking is exactly what's needed to ensure that growth benefits everyone, including the Indigenous landowners, not just a few, like overseas tourism ventures or mining companies. But this will take more than just good intentions. It will take training and capacity building, ensuring that local communities have the skills and knowledge they need to engage effectively. It means that government officials, developers, and traditional landowners are all equipped to navigate complex negotiations. And it means creating an environment where traditional rights are acknowledged and upheld. The path forward. As we look to the future, we're reminded that sustainable progress means more than just economic growth. It means thinking about intergenerational equity. We need solutions that ensure future generations can enjoy the same benefits from your land and sea as previous generations have. Think about the children in your community. What kind of world do you want to leave for them? A world where they know the stories of our ancestors, where they can still fish in the waters that their grandparents fished, where they can gather on the same land that has brought families together for centuries? Or do you want a future where those connections are lost, traded away for short-term gains? We have a unique opportunity to lead the way, to show that development and Indigenous rights can coexist, that growth can be sustainable, and that cultural values that define communities can be preserved. It starts with creating frameworks that are fair and inclusive, frameworks that recognize both the economic value of land and the cultural significance it holds. Imagine a system where landowners are partners in development, where they're not just compensated on a one-off or nominal annual basis, but are actually empowered to take an active role. This means creating opportunities for capacity building, ensuring that young people in your communities have the skills to manage projects, negotiate agreements, and protect their heritage. It means valuing traditional knowledge as much as we value financial investments, whether it's through hybrid compensation models, new development partnerships, or careful stewardship. We have the chance to create a future where justice and growth go hand in hand. Now, it won't be easy, but it will be worth the effort. A call to action. As we reflect on the rising tide of Indigenous advocacy from Australia's Parliament to the halls of CHOGM in Samoa, it's clear that the push for justice is far from over. The Pacific has always been a place where the land and sea shape who the people are. And now, these movements for justice and equity must shape those very Indigenous people's future. What can we do to support this? Well, it starts with recognising the value of the land and the sea, not just as resources, but as part of Indigenous identity. It means making sure that those who have traditionally cared for these lands are included in the decisions about their future. As we look ahead, let's ensure that the wealth we pass on to future generations isn't just economic. It's cultural, spiritual, and sustainable. Let's remember, our greatest wealth lies not in what we build, but in what we preserve. Thank you for listening to the Customary Land podcast. Until next time, I'm Spike, reminding you that our greatest wealth lies not in what we build, but in what we preserve.